Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on topics such as leadership, presentation skills, and how to get your voice out there, how to be heard. Before I go into the fascinating conversation with my guest today, Susan Harrow, I'd like to invite you to see where your presentation skills are strong by taking our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are strong and where perhaps a little bit of support could help you get the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Susan Harrow, who is a media trainer, marketing strategist, and martial artist. She specializes in working with brilliant innovators and startups, solving the world's most pressing problems. She has a black belt in Aikido, and she's a former tennis pro and author of the best-selling book, Sell Yourself Without Selling Your Soul. For the past 32 years, she's run Harrow Communications, Inc., which is a worldwide media company, a media consultancy, where she's trained thousands of people in verbal and nonverbal communication. You can see why I liked her. Her clients include Fortune 500 CEOs, celebrity chefs, rock stars, speakers, dot-com millionaires, New York Times best-selling authors and entrepreneurs, all of whom she prepares for TV, radio, panel, podcast, and print interviews to be highly desirable repeat guests who shine in the media spotlight. She has a course called The Zen of Fame, Your Genius Gone Viral, which shows people how to promote themselves with integrity and spirit. And what you might not know is that she was once almost sold into slavery for 10 camels and a mule. I know you'll enjoy this conversation. Let's go to the interview with Susan Harrow. Susan Harrow, thank you so much for joining us on Speakers Who Get Results.
I'm so happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this topic too.
Oh, good. Well, before we get into shining in the media spotlight and all of that, which is something that we can always get information about, let me ask you, who would be your dream interview? If you were to interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
I would want to interview Buddha.
Whoa. Okay. All right.
And what I would ask the Buddha is, I actually wouldn't ask the Buddha anything. I would want to be in the Buddha's presence, because I think that is the most important thing for all of us. Camus said, our presence is the sum of all of our experiences. And I think we bring that to bear. And of course, we've got our genetics and all of that. So to me, sitting in the presence of the Buddha to get an instant kind of, I would want to get the transmission of ideas of enlightenment. I know that this is even more and more unlikely. But to me, the presence of someone even before they say words, and I love words, is so important. I really learned that too from my martial arts teacher. I always wanted to stand right behind him and to actually imagine that my body was his body moving in this graceful movement when I was just a beginner and certainly not moving that way. But that was my spot on the mat. every single time. And so my spot would be in front of the Buddha to transmit, however that transmission comes, to whatever knowledge I needed to move through the world, and how to shine that best out with the gifts and talents that I came into this world with.
I love it. I love it. Although I must say there's a little practical part of me that says, so, I wonder if he picks his teeth, and, does he have betel nuts staining his gums or things like that? But that's the practical.
I love that. I think when people worry so much about their physical appearance, myself included, right? But I think that we do see beyond that, and we see the beauty of the person when they're standing in front of us. And that actually really doesn't matter. And I really do believe that's true. So I think that even if he had stains in his teeth, we would see his spirit.
That's wonderful. Okay, great. Cool. I'll come to that interview. Sounds fabulous. So Susan, we're doing a little series about PR and getting your voice out there, especially. And talk to us about imposter syndrome, how you see it, and how you help the people you work with recognize it and deal with it when it shows up.
Imposter syndrome in women is really an epidemic. It's at epidemic proportions. There's 75% of women who feel imposter syndrome. And I really want to shift that, because self-doubt and imposter syndrome is natural. Let's get that established. But
everybody has imposter syndrome somewhere.
Everybody does. And we always have doubt when we're going to the next level of our skills or experience. So just accepting the fact that we're going to have self-doubt, but imposter syndrome is really more about sort of chastising ourselves or being in the state of compare and despair. And that's really different. So the first thing about imposter syndrome is really thinking about setting your intention daily. First of all, it's setting your deepest intention, who you want to be. And we're really three people. We're the people, right, who we are right now. We're the people in our past, and then we're people in our future. And the only thing that we have control of right now is our present and our future, not the past and what we wish we didn't. So imagining how, who is the person that you want to become? And then monitoring and micromanaging every thought that comes into our mind and asking ourselves, is this in service to who we want to be? In the world. And that's not even really easy, but it's also not to micromanage the thoughts. And what I mean by that is just to let them come up and we go, oh, I'm comparing again. And it happens all the time. It just happened to me on another podcast where the podcast host, he was a 3rd degree Taekwondo martial artist, and he was going for his 4th level. And I'm just a lowly black belt. And that's what I was thinking, like, oh, I'm just a 1st degree black belt. And I'm like time out. I go, right. I started training at 56. I kind of go logical. I started at 56. He started way younger, and he was way younger than I am anyway. And he is still going to training, 4 hours a day to get to that next level. And but I had that moment of shame. Like, oh, I'm not really very accomplished. And then I really had to consciously put that aside and said, this is what I can do with my body, with my time, with my age. Would I like to become a 3rd degree black belt in Aikido? Yes. And I'll need to put in that time and practice and mental and muscle memory.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you about that. But this whole thing about imposter syndrome, one of the things that I notice, I teach people, especially women, how to get their voices heard. And so presentation skills, public speaking is a huge piece of what I do. It's the lens through which I do executive coaching. How do you show up? As a podcast host and as someone who talks to people who plan events, I'm talking to people all the time. And because of the work I do, I notice when they've got a summit or a conference and it's 95% men speaking. And I talk to podcast hosts and event organizers, and I say, why don't you have more women? And over, I hear, oh, I'd love to have more women. But you reach out to, I reach out to someone and she says, oh, I'm not ready. Ask me next year. And of course, by the time next year comes around, the topic isn't relevant, or they've forgotten, whatever. How do we recognize that you were talking about imposter syndrome coming up when you're reaching for the next level? There's something about going for it, even if you're not fully prepared.
We're never ready.
Yeah.
End of story. We're never ready. And I was just talking to a new client of mine who's a psychiatrist for children and adolescents. And she said the only effective therapy for anxiety right now that she has found is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's going through the experience of it. It's actually she said, kids don't get better if they don't face their fears, and parents coddle them. So if you're not actually doing it, having the actual experience of it, then you're not going to be able to do it. So instead of not accepting it, to accept everything. I love that Shonda Rhimes wrote that book where she said she had the year of saying yes, where she said yes to everything. And how hard is that? But it's also through the facing of the fears, but it's actually continuing doing the thing so it gets less scary. And that's the whole process of media training, is we role play. And we role play everything, because then you'll have had the experience and then it won't be as scary. But it's super scary if you haven't done it. So it's only in the doing it that it becomes less scary. So for women, I say, you accept it. These are opportunities in the moment. And I was training a workshop in Los Angeles, and it was a group of people, media training to prep them for TV. This woman who runs a $30 million company said that she's at all of these marketing. She's a great marketer, and she was at all of these marketing seminars. And she said they were all men, and it was like there were 3 women in the room. And she complained to the guy, why don't you have more women? And he said, why don't you stand up and talk? And she said, okay. And she did it. And she stood up and talked about how some of what was going on in that room was not serving women. It was a particular male model, and it didn't work for everyone, and that we need models that work for different types of people. Women are included in that. But she took that opportunity and she spoke up and gave women in that audience, those 3 women, but also men, a different perspective on marketing themselves. And the more we do this, and more we change the perspective, not just for us as women, but we change the perspective to the men who are controlling all of these presentations and seminars, right? And not blame them, but change them through our demonstration of our own experience. And that's the only way that, maybe it's not the only way, but it is a way of that things will begin to shift. But we each have to do our part. And I ask each of you to stand up and do the hard thing, whatever it is, however small, to just start doing it now. Yeah.
It's something I keep thinking, how we're socialized as children. Boys are socialized to try something, and if it doesn't work, you just get up and try again. Don't be a crybaby, etc. Girls are socialized to be careful. So if there's one mistake or one thing that's painful, it's be careful, don't hurt yourself, etc. It's not that we're trained, because I don't think anybody does it on purpose. I think society, it's just all these subconscious societal messages that teach us these things. Don't get
dirty, don't speak up, be nice, don't hurt yourself. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was an au pair in Paris, and this one little girl was always in a dress, and I was an au pair for a little boy, and we're playing in the mud, and we would ruin her dress. And I'm like, don't put her in a dress.
Yeah.
Because we're going to do this. And the other thing is, I do have to say, my brother, who's got, she's about to be 8, he is not raising her that way. He is raising her to be like a daredevil. Mm-hmm. And I love that. So, but whatever way you're raised, because some of us, you and I are at a certain older, age where we were raised that way.
We have fallen on our faces and survived. We know that we'll survive. Yeah.
Yes. And I actually wasn't raised that way. I was raised with parents who said, you need to speak up, you need to stand out. And have I paid the price for that? Oh, you bet. Mm-hmm. In a lot of different ways, even like in my dojo, it's like the advantage, disadvantage. People, when they want to have a question asked and they're afraid to ask it, they come up and say, Susan, you asked this question. Because they know I will, because I'm not afraid of looking stupid. But the advantage of looking stupid is that I got more attention, and I was willing to stand in front and be not made a fool of, but know that something was maybe too difficult for me and I wasn't going to look great up there. Like the one time my sensei pinned me with one finger. And he said, and I couldn't move, right? Because it's very powerful. And he said, am I hurting you? And I said, just my pride.
Right.
But it was because I would get the experience of the sensei. I got his training because I was willing to look foolish and to speak out.
Sensei, for those who are not familiar with the term, means master. It's more than maestro, so which is the term that I lived for 30 years. But I worked in Japan for a while, briefly, so I learned that one.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah,
you were talking about. You mentioned the term muscle memory, and I'm wondering if that's a way that your martial arts training has informed the way you show up.
Absolutely. One of the things that we do before we step out into the mat is, or whenever anyone grabs us, is to expand our energy or ki in all directions. So some people call it chi, prana. So above
your aura.
Yeah. To the sides, to the back. And once you do that, you're extending your space into the room, and also to keep it extended the whole time. So when someone grabs you, they're not taking your center first. You want to take their center, and then we want to take them off balance and throw them. It's the same in a room, in a meeting, in the media. You want to have your own center aligned with the host center, and then you both come to a new center, which is a mutually agreed upon center, where you're both equal. And then in a media interview, you want to guide the information in the direction you want, no matter what the host asks. And so they can ask you anything. And it's the same in a meeting. You want to be able to imagine and go with before you change over. So sometimes, another thing that women are taught is like, don't go up against in a confrontation. And sometimes we want to. Sometimes there's a hard stop, but sometimes there's a soft move before we redirect the conversation. So it's great to have all of those in your repertoire. And the way that informs me too is when I say muscle and mental memory, it is through that you're constantly tweaking, like my sensei, the trainer, or my sensei would say, you might make 100 throws and one feels right, and remember how that feels.
Yes.
And it is that constant tweaking, because it's the 10,000 throws, or whatever, the 10,000 media interviews, whatever that is, that you start to gain your expertise, but each time you're tweaking.
So
it's small tweaks. Yeah.
I know you have a list of the ways women give up power in interviews.
I have a list. I have it right here
Oh,
because I want
good.
to remember them all. So
Okay.
so I wrote them down. And by the way, it's
Well,
okay to have that on a media when you're doing like a Zoom like this, or
uh-huh.
it's okay to have notes and glance down.
Hmm.
And then, and if you're on a TV show and it's cutting edge, it's okay to like have a little card with you for like
Yes.
cutting statistics and things like that you can't memorize. I mean, you're
Uh-huh.
not going to be reading it, but if it's something like a statistic or something important that you want, it's okay to have that with you.
That's useful note. Okay. So what are the 10? And then maybe I may ask you about one or two of them.
Oh, I didn't prepare the whole 10. I
Oh no.
prepared
Okay, then
five.
just tell us the ones and otherwise you go to her website and you ask her. You go to her
Yes,
website and
yes,
find it there, I'm sure.
I do have 10. Before we talk about like the 5 ways they give up power, I really want to talk about the foundation to establish the 3 things that you need to have that really are instantly noticeable about you. And that first thing we talked a minute about presence,
Mm-hmm.
that is really your facial language, body language, verbal language,
Mm-hmm.
the vibe of you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're a musician, you're a musician and deal with musicians. We have a vibe. There's a sound vibration that
Right.
comes through your voice, but it comes through your body, it comes through everything. So that when everything is in alignment, we read you as command presence. We'll read you. So that's
Mm-hmm.
number one that you want to have. We assume your authority. Like when I was talking about in Aikido, we extend our ki in all directions. And that's something that you would want to do before you ever came to a meeting mentally, too, to be
Yes.
able to expand your energy in all directions.
Well, and also just to say that's I call that one the magic carpet, actually, is
Ooh, right.
to expand it into the room before you walk into the room. Send out your magic carpet so that they're on your carpet in
Mm,
your chi, your energy,
I
so that
love
when you
that.
walk in, it's actually your party.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I love that magic carpet.
yes.
That's totally great. I'm actually practicing when I'm in bed. I'm practicing extending it throughout the whole neighborhood, like down to the end of my
Ooh.
block, to can I get to the end of the whole street? How far can I imagine extending it? And I practice it on people too, because we know that like sometimes if you're looking at somebody on the bus or
Mm-hmm.
on the plane and they turn around, right? It's because
Mm-hmm.
you're focusing your energy on them. So the practice of so we already know how to do it.
You
It's
have
just
to, but you do have to practice
you
it.
do have to practice it because there's
Yeah.
time where you want to pull it in and
Yeah.
there's time you want to expand it out. So it does
Mm-hmm.
it is practice. Number 2 is the messaging. So it's really about and I know because you are work with so many musicians, it's tone, vocal variety, pitch, pace, pause, staccato,
Mm-hmm.
and legato to be able to talk about things, quickly if you need to, or draw things out. So that's what makes you
Mm-hmm.
interesting to listen to in a
Mm-hmm.
media interview or in a meeting. And you want to use your voice to emphasize whatever is important to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have that kind of vocal variety and range so you can make a point and move through whatever it is you want to communicate. I love what Luciano Pavarotti said, that your voice should have the sun in it.
Yes. Yes.
And your whole being should have the sun in it.
That's your energy.
It's
Yeah.
your energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the practice as well. So now let's go through the things that I think are some of the most common things that women do. First thing is to shrink their bodies.
Oh yeah. Shrink your body. Don't shrink your body. Correct.
So we slump, we shrink, we drop our heads, right? So
Mm-hmm.
instead, you can imagine like string coming out of your head, or I also like to imagine a golden core of
Mm-hmm.
like a beam that comes
Yes.
from the heavens to the earth. And so you can imagine that. And then, practice spreading out
Mm-hmm.
wherever you are. So no, it doesn't have to be, like we're taking up so much space, but just practice spreading out a little more than is comfortable for you. The second thing is, and I was trying to think of, Elizabeth, at a time, like, do I have an acronym? And I came up with one, and I'm not doing it in this order, but I came up with SCAD, but I don't really like that. I'm like, kind of a funny acronym. So shrinking, I'll do it in order then. Number 2 is crumble under criticism. One of the ways that men test us and test each other is a competition. They want to see how much you can take. Deborah Tannen was the first one who started to do research on this. It's not to crush you, it's to test you. Do you have strong metal? Are you capable? Can you do this? So instead of crumbling, okay, we might have a moment where we get pulled off center, we breathe, we come back to center. And then what you want to just say, use the phrase like, that's interesting. I'm curious why you say that. I heard, I think it was Ilana Van Zandt in a meeting, she said, some man said something that was less than kind. And she actually said to him, I'm curious what it is about me that you thought that I could be spoken to in that way. And I thought that was so interesting because it showed what gap in ourselves that we need to look at, that we created that opening. And it's not a criticism when we all have openings somewhere, myself included. But if somebody did that, or if somebody's overly friendly, I want to ask myself, not that it's my fault, but did I create an opening somehow with my face, with my body, with my intention? So that kind of awareness. A in SCAD is they ask permission to speak or do something.
Yes. That's the hello, hi, hello, can I talk? Yes.
Can I? No. So in a media interview, this is particularly important when you're on a panel to be able to jump in with no permission. You jump in with your idea and you don't say any kind of preamble like, I think that's the one too, but it's just, you don't ever ask permission. You just do it.
Yeah, that's right. It actually makes for better television that way.
Way better. Oh yeah, it makes better everything that way.
Yes, it makes a better interview. If
and then D is don't interrupt. You don't interrupt others when you need to, or you allow other people to interrupt you.
Wait. So
they don't interrupt
others. Is the way giving away power?
Yes, they don't interrupt. So some people, they need to be interrupted.
Right.
You need to learn how to interrupt people, which is not easy for us, again, because we've been raised with the disease to please. We've been raised that we want to be polite, but we do want to learn how to interrupt. And then we also want to learn how not to be interrupted. So to be not interrupted can be simply as saying, wait, I'm not done. And we can do a louder pattern interrupt or a softer pattern interrupt. So a pattern interrupt is just, it changes the energy like that. So we might go, wait, and then we can lower our voice and draw in. So you can do it either way, or you can say, wait, I'm not done, and then continue on. But the key thing is to continue on and not let the person, and sometimes we have to do it. It's kind of like, I know in dog training, you're only supposed to give the command once. Preferably, we only need to give the command once, but in some cases, we need to give the command more than once.
Well, I would also think that it's useful to have your comments organized so that you're not wandering off on tangents. Both men and women do this, but not wandering off on tangents, but knowing what you want to say and saying it concisely. You're kind of asking to be interrupted if you're talking like that.
I totally agree. And I'm 100% with you. That would make so many more meetings, happy places if you asked everyone. And I think you can do that. That's about setting the intention of the meeting. If you're the leader, to say, I would like to have everyone have their 5 points ready in this meeting, and we each get 5 minutes or whatever, right? To be able to condense that into a conversation, to set those kind of parameters, whatever works for you. It may not need to be limited to that amount of time, but, and, I did know a management consultant who would do in meetings when people were going on, he'd go,
He would just like
wrap it
give
up.
the gesture to say, wrap it up. Yeah.
We need to move forward. And I think that's, you don't want that. You don't want somebody to do that to you. So it's to your advantage to prepare your sound bites or your key messages for any kind of meeting or presentation or media, so you can get out exactly what it is you want your audience to know.
Well, and especially if it's media, the sound bites are so important because that's what gets quoted and that's what gets broadcast. So having a sound bite, a concise sound bite, that's what gets you, as you be the one that shows up on the evening news, as opposed to the one who's rambling on and on.
And if you are rambling on and it's edited, people can splice those together in terms and create something that you did not intend. So there's an advantage, disadvantage for editing and being live, because live, obviously, if you say something that you wish you hadn't, then that's forever recorded. But on the other hand, being edited is also a danger. So when you say something really well, a reporter, a host, a producer will want to keep it and will want to keep it intact. Yeah.
Well, Susan, there's so much I want to ask you.
We're both in this field, so we
I know. There's so much I want to ask you. I'm going to have to bring you back, I think, to ask you about the 500 other questions I have for you. Well, first of all, we're going to post all sorts of links in the show notes. But if there was one thing, someone who's listening to this who says, great, a whole bunch of useful things, where do I start? What's one thing to start with?
Start with your deepest intention. What the 3 questions I ask every client is, what's your deepest intention? How do you want to serve? Because that sets the foundation for your sound bites, for your key messages. Number 2 is, what do you want for yourself? And we really look at that in the realm of professionally, personally, physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally, because doing PR can open up that entire world. But having those kind of intentions and walking through the world with those intentions, with thinking about that, keeping in mind that person that you want to be. I meet people everywhere. I just met a great gal, who's the community manager for Supernatural, a virtual reality exercise program on the plane, and it's like clicked, right? Like, so I think you can meet people anywhere. And then the third thing is, what do you want your audience to do? It can be changing a perception, but it's also, do you want them to go to your website? Do you want them to donate to a charity? Whatever that is, I think keeping those 3 things in mind. And I think the other thing that I want to say is collect compliments.
Yes.
Because it's, what is it, 1 in 10 or 1 in 7, when someone says a negative thing, it takes like 10 positive things to counteract it. And the way that we want to do that is not aphorisms, because you may not already believe them. Meaning, I can't say, if I said, I'm totally confident and comfortable at all times. Well, I don't believe that. But you can use the phrase, I'm becoming more and more comfortable and confident every day. And one of my clients who came to me, who's so amazing, she's in 3 areas: cybersecurity, diversity and inclusion. And what was the third one? Management consulting. And she came to me because she had lost her confidence. Now, she was already an extraordinary speaker and had run teams of men from all different parts of the world. And so highly, highly skilled. And when we started working together, she said, something shifted, and that's not an issue anymore. So now we're just focusing on the core messaging, but not on the confidence. So you start to practice receiving the compliments and really having the internal experience of success, not the external one, like not what I've accomplished outwardly, but inwardly, what kind of a person am I? And doing good deeds every day. There's research now in neuroscience that even thinking about doing a good deed before and after you do it is actually also bolstering your neural pathways. And I love that idea. So we can think about doing the good deed, we can do the good deed and have the great experience. And then we can think about having the great experience, and we can start to build our internal capacity that way. And that's a practice, that's a daily practice. Because when we were talking about building muscle and mental memory, those are the things that are cumulative that we don't even notice, that we've suddenly one day we've shifted in confidence. And when somebody asks, can you speak right now on the spot? You say yes. And yes, maybe you're going to get a little twinge anyway, but you stand up and do it.
Yeah. Collecting compliments helps with the imposter syndrome, because all these people have said all these cool things about you. Remember
that are true.
Yeah, let them be true. Let it be a fact.
They are.
One of my colleagues says.
And we notice it. And, one of the things that I do, and I've done this in workshops for 20 years, is when I have people meet each other for the first time and say what their initial impression is, something really great about them. And it's always 100% accurate with everyone. So this is, we already perceive who you are. Now it's in 1/3 of a second. It's a split second. So we already know you. And so to take in those beautiful things that people perceive about you, because they already are.
It's not vanity. It's not vanity. Standing in your power. Yes.
I like that. It's command presence, and it's being accepting. I think it's also the process, which we all have a difficult time doing, of accepting yourself.
Yeah. Well, Susan Harrow, I want to thank you so much. We took us a while to get this organized, but I'm so glad we finally had this conversation. And I'm absolutely going to have to bring you back in a couple of months to ask you some of the other 500 questions I had. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host. If you enjoyed this, please tell your friends, subscribe, check us out on YouTube and subscribe to the channel, and particularly rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. That's the one that matters. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.